If your aim feels inconsistent and you've already changed your sense, your mouse pad, maybe even your mouse, and it still feels off, there's something you probably never checked, the actual size. And if you get this wrong, it doesn't matter how good your mouse is on paper. Now after testing over 40 mice, I realized most of my aim problems came down to grip and shape, not the specs. And in this video I'm showing you the method that I personally use to find the right mouse for my hand, so by the end of this video you'll know exactly how to measure, how to identify your real grip, and how to match both to a mouse that actually fits you without buying 5 to find out. But first let me tell you why this is super important. Now when your mouse doesn't physically fit your hand, your brain has to work just to hold it stable. You're gripping harder than you need to without even realizing it. Your fingers are tense when they should be relaxed, and a bunch of other problems. And the worst part is it gets worse over time. And here's a quick way to check. If you catch yourself readjusting your grip in the middle of a round, that's a sign. If your ring finger or pinky feels tense after a session, that's also a sign. If your game is solid for one game and then it falls apart and this happens more than one time, that's probably a sign too. So the question becomes, how do you actually figure out what fits your hand before you waste money on the wrong thing? And it starts with two measurements that most people either skip or do wrong. First one is hand length. Put a ruler flat on your desk, place the crease of your wrist, that first line where your hand bends, right at 0. Then measure straight to the tip of your middle finger. Hand flat, relax, don't stretch it. Now the mistake I see constantly is people measuring from the base of the palm instead of the wrist crease. That's lower and it cuts off like a centimeter or more, and it will send you toward the mouse that's too small for you. Second one is hand width. Measure across your knuckles from the outside of your index finger to the outside of your pinky. And this is important, leave your thumb out. Your thumb works on its own axis. Now including that, it will inflate the number and pushes you toward mice that are too wide. So for reference, my hands are almost 21 cm long and pretty wide, around like 9 cm. That puts me clearly in the large territory. Small is roughly under 70.5 cm and medium is 70.5 to 19 cm. And large is like 19 plus. Now let's also look at a rough way to use these numbers. Your hand length tells you what mouse length to aim for. If you're small, you're generally looking at mice under 150 mm. Medium somewhere around 115 to 125. And for large, anything above it's okay. Your hand width tells you what grip width to look on your mouse. That's basically the distance between the two areas on each side of your mouse where you usually place your thumb and your ring finger to grip your mouse. If your hands are narrow, let's say under 8 cm, you want something around 53 to 58 mm grip. For average, you're looking at 57 to 60. For wide, 9 plus, 10 plus, whatever, somewhere around 62 to 64. Now these are not perfect rules, it's always personal preference at the end of the day, but they're like a decent starting point, so when you go look for a mouse, you're not starting from zero. But here is where it gets tricky, because two people with the exact same hand size can need completely different mice, and the reason is grip, and your grip is probably not what you think it is. So let's get the basics out of the way fast. Now in theory, there are like 3 main grip types. Palm is where your entire hand rests on the mouse. Full contact, fingers flat on the buttons. It's very stable, very smooth for tracking, but you lose a lot of vertical speed because your entire arm has to move to adjust up and down. Claw is where your palm anchors to the back of the mouse, but your fingers arch up and only the tips touch the buttons. You get the stability from the palm contact, plus you can pull the mouse back into your hand for quick vertical correction. And fingertip is where your palm doesn't touch the mouse at all. You're holding it purely with your fingertips. But here is what nobody tells you. Almost nobody uses a clean version of any of these. Most people are somewhere in between. Relaxed claw, modified fingertip, pincer, some hybrid that doesn't have a name. Now grip is a spectrum, not 3 boxes. And on top of that, your grip changes. When I'm chilling on desktop or playing some casual, my grip is pretty relaxed fingertip. Lots of space between my palm and the mouse. But the moment I switch to a competitive game and let's say I'm in a clutch round, my hand tenses up and my grip shifts. My fingers curl tighter, my palm gets closer to the mouse, and suddenly I'm closer to a claw grip than a fingertip. And that's the grip that actually matters for choosing a mouse. So here is what I recommend and what actually worked for me. Step 1, just put your hand on your mouse right now without thinking about it. Don't pose it, don't try to correct the grip, just grab it naturally. That's your baseline. Step 2, and this is the one that changed everything for me, record yourself during a competitive match. Not like a deathmatch warm-up, an actual ranked game when you care about winning. Then watch the clip back. Look at what your hand does during a fight. Look at where your palm is, how much your fingers curl, whether your grip tightens or not. If your casual grip and in your game grip are different, the in-game grip is the one you should actually be picking for your mouse, because that's when your hand is doing what it naturally does, under pressure, and that's when the mouse needs to support you the most. If you're, let's say, like a palm grip player, you need the most mouse, 60 to 7% of your hand length, with a pronounced rear hum that fills your palm. If your claw length matters less, but grip width becomes critical, because if the mouse is too wide, you're fighting the squeeze every round. And if your fingertip, you need the smallest and lowest profile possible, because if that rear hump is too tall, it physically hits your palm when you try to pull the mouse down and your whole aim motion just stops dead. Okay, so now you know your measurements and you know your actual grip. And you'd think at this point you just need a mouse that matches those numbers and you're done. And honestly, for a lot of people that's enough. But there is one more thing that trips people up constantly, and is the reason two mice with identical specs can feel completely different in your hand. Because of where the hump sits, how the sides curve, how steep the front drops off. And this is where tools like Elo Shapes can actually mislead you if you rely on them too much. Elo Shapes is great for a starting point. You can overlay two mice and compare their outlines, but it's a 2D comparison of a 3D object. And if you would prefer something that is 3D, you should look at websites like Artthings. Of course, their database is not as big as Elo Shapes, but you can still get like the popular mice and get like a 3D view of them. But if you don't want to do any of that, here is the method that I personally use. Think about which mouse you've aimed the best with. Not the one that had like the best specs, not which one you were most excited about, which one did you forget you were holding in the first place. Now for me that always was the Logitech G Pro Superlight family. With it I could flick, I could track, I could do vertical mouse movements, basically everything that you need in aiming. So now whenever I look at a new mouse, I compare it against that. Does the hump sit in a similar spot? Is the front similar? Are the sides roughly the same curve? If the core elements match, there's a good chance it will work for me as well. If the hump is way more aggressive or way further forward, I already know it's going to fight my grip. And funny enough, the best shape that I ever used ended up being the Attack Shark X3, because it's basically a smaller G Pro Superlight, same design language, same proportion, just scaled down a bit. So that's how I do it personally. But whether you use my approach or something completely different, the point is the same. You need a system, not a tier list, not a recommendation from someone with like different hands than yours. An actual repeatable method to narrow it down. And I'll keep it simple. Here is the method step by step. First, identify your real grip, not the one you think you use, the one you actually use in a competitive match when you care about the outcome. And film yourself if you really have to. Second, find your reference shape. Think back to every mouse you've used and ask yourself which one felt the most natural, which one let you aim without thinking about how you're holding it. If you never had a mouse that felt right, start with something super safe. So let's say for medium to large hands, something like the G Pro Superlight family is a solid baseline. For smaller hands, something like the Zaopin Z1 or Vaxi type shape. Nothing too aggressive, nothing with a crazy hump. Third, take those hand measurements from earlier and actually use them. Go to Elo Shapes, filter by mice that are in your size range based on your hand length and width, and that should cut out like hundreds of options down to maybe like 20 or 30, it really depends on the database that they have. From there, compare those mice against your reference shape, and here you can use the 3D shape compare tool from Artthings. Check the grip width first, and that's the narrowest point of your mouse where your thumb and finger squeeze. If your pinky was tense on your last mouse, look for something slightly wider. If your fingers felt stretched, go narrower. Then check length and hand position. If something lines up with your reference in all three, that's your short list. Fourth, once you pick one, actually give it time. This is where I see a lot of people mess up constantly. A new shape feels weird for the first few days, and this is because your hand is basically adapting. Give it like 2 to 3 weeks of real playtime before you decide if you should stick with it or not. If it just feels unfamiliar but nothing hurts, stay with it. But if after like 2 weeks your hand actually is in pain, you feel numbness, your fingers cramp up every session, that's not adaptation, that's like a terrible mouse. And one thing I want to be clear about, don't buy a mouse because a pro uses it. Don't buy a mouse because a YouTuber says it's the best mouse of 2026. Those people have different hands than you, different grips, and thousands of hours of adaptation on their specific setup. But if you just take one thing from this video, let it be this. Your hand size and your grip decide more about your aim than any spec on a box ever will. A perfect sensor in the wrong shape is just like an expensive mistake. So get a right fit first. Everything else is secondary in my opinion. So drop your hand measurements, your grip type in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how many of you have been playing with a mouse that actually doesn't match their hand. And if you're not sure what grip you use, film one match and find out. And if you want to learn even more about mice, check out the next video.